I am thrilled today to be hosting Zach Watson on the podcast. Many of you have probably seen his videos floating around TikTok, floating around Instagram, talking about sharing the mental load and the emotional labor in your relationship. Here at the Connection Codes, we always focus on the root cause of what's happening in our body and what we are feeling. And I love that Zach is tackling the logistics of what's happening in our home and how we can help each other carry that weight, what that looks like, and how we can partner with each other on a whole new level. This is a topic that Wes and I have previously had intense disconnects over, and Zach is out there now sharing more education in a way that helps you actually see behind the scenes of what mental load is. Also, he shares at the very end the very first time of doing the core emotion wheel. Zach is a new connection coder. He's gone through a few of our classes and diving into foundations, and hearing him share the wheel for the very first time is so powerful, extremely connecting, and it's not often that I get to witness someone do it for the first time. So I hope you will stay to the end and listen. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis. Together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Hi, friends. We are super excited today to have Zach Watson on our podcast. Zach, hello, and thank you for joining us. Super excited, and we would love for you just to start, Zach, by telling our audience a little bit about you, who you are, where you're from, and what you do on TikTok. We just love to know a little bit more about your story.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So, 33-year-old man, father of one toddler, and married for, I always get confused between when we met versus when we actually got married. We've been married for 8 years, but when she let go of the guy that she was with, because I said I was fully committed to her, that feels honestly more like the anniversary of when we started. But okay. We're actually in 14 days, it'll be 10 years since we committed to each other. But yeah, so a lot of TikTok, I know a lot of people recognize me from TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, talking about mental load. I started talking about it about a year ago after reading the Fair Play book and recognizing where I was consistently messing up in my relationship, adding mental load where I didn't understand it, adding emotional labor where I didn't understand it. And people were like, wow, this is creating language that I didn't understand. And my favorite comment that I didn't know how to respond to for the first 2 months was, why am I crying right now? And it was because a lot of people were feeling, mostly moms, were feeling very seen by someone else understanding the emotional labor and the mental load that they were dealing with. Yeah. And no one had really put it to them that way before. Yeah. Now my response to the question of why am I crying right now is, you feel seen and you have language to now articulate the thing you've been struggling with for as long as you've been a parent or in a relationship.
Yeah, totally. I love that so much. I shared with Zach, because he and we've got to meet before and talk about different things. A couple of years ago, during COVID, Wes and I, when we had our own podcast, one of the biggest fights we ever got into was over the Fair Play book. And we sat down and we went through the material and divided out the mental load. And it just wasn't clicking for Wes, because Wes is such a partner. He is such a helper in our home and in our family. But there was still this really big gap that we were experiencing. And so, Zach, will you share with me, what do you mean by mental load and emotional labor? What does that mean?
Sure. I think the easiest way to describe it is trying to put it on what people are currently experiencing. It's the thing that keeps you up at night. It's the thing that as you're driving, you're walking to your car, you're asking yourself, did I check those boxes? Did I do those things? Did I send that email? Did I respond to the teacher? Did I pack the extra snack in their bag so that they're not having a meltdown 15 minutes into the trip over to grandma's? All those oftentimes small things that are typically pretty important but maybe not urgent in the moment, that are typically getting filled in the gaps domestically by mom. And I think probably the disconnect I'm imagining that you had with Wes was that a lot of that book talks about mental load in terms of the domestic context, but we don't talk about what that looks like for people in professions. So me as a salesperson, did I send that quote over to the customer? Oh, that's right. I need to respond to them so that I can get that information from them, so then I can send over the right information back and get this all done by the 30th of the month. So it's, I think, things that keep you up at night, things that you can't just sit down and relax with your coffee because you're bothered by all these to-dos.
Yeah, I love that. One of the big shifts for us, honestly, just happened recently, and that was me watching your video on Instagram and Wes overhearing it and then me showing him. He's, oh, that makes so much sense. I can understand now what you were talking about 3 years ago, but Wes and I were just like going through the logistics of all of it and fighting over those things. Zach, one of the things that you do online is you give great examples of what this type of labor actually looks like. Do you have one in your head that you can share with us of what an example of mental load is?
Sure. It's a video that I haven't produced yet, so you guys get a tiny bit of a sneak peek. I'll probably make it in the next couple days. So the other day, I wrote this down after we got into a decent size, I wouldn't even want to call, maybe it's a fight. Yesterday, Alyssa's getting ready to go on a 6-day trip tomorrow. She's been trying to hustle to get a bunch of her work things done. Her job is, it's like it all either comes all at once or like nothing. So she's like probably working sometimes what feels like 5 hours a week because she's just waiting for responses on emails. And there's sometimes it's 50 hours a week. So she was in one of those moments where she got a bunch of things. As she said, hey, I need to respond to this. I was like, okay, we have about an hour and a half before we got to get her to daycare. I shouldn't have any issue just taking over completely from here. Fine, go ahead. No resentment, no nothing. As time went on, I was getting lunch packed, and then there were some pants that she had put back into the dryer because they were not dry enough that she wanted to put her in, which she had said before I had gotten her dressed. So she was under the impression...
you're talking about your daughter. There's pants that she wants for your daughter. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. She's thinking to herself, okay, I'm putting these into the dryer so that it's a certainty that she's going to change out of them. She's also thinking to herself, all right, I really need to get her, so she has really curly hair and we got to get it wet and brushed before we go to school. And there are a bunch of things in the trunk that need to be moved for Everly to get into her car seat. As the moments are ticking closer and closer towards needing to get to daycare, I'm still under the full impression that I'm responsible for this whole moment. Totally fine with it. What I was not on the same page with her about was the level of urgency and necessity around a couple of these small things. So again, they seem big in the moment and small like in the macro level. I knew I needed to leave by about 8:50 so I could be back for the 9:15 call. As these small things, her changing her pants and then her brushing her hair, those two things I'm thinking like, why are we not just keeping her in the pants that she's in? Why are we brushing her hair? She's about to put a hat on. It's going to ruin it anyway. And it's cold out, so we don't really want her to have wet hair. And then as we're getting ready to go, I'm bringing her down to the car. And then Alyssa is saying, I think she came downstairs for a second and Everly is in her arms, goes to hand her off. She doesn't want to. So, okay, I'll bring you down to the car. And sometimes we'll say, okay, we'll ride along if she's being clingy. At that point, she's being clingy, and for Alyssa to sit in the car next to her, we need to move all this stuff out of the trunk. So now at this point, we're getting a little bit closer towards, all right, could be late for the coaching call I have at 9:15. And we're consistently adding 1, 2, 3 minute items. It's getting closer and closer. And at one point I say to Alyssa, I get that you're getting in the car and joining us. I think you might just need to take over from here now that I'm going to be late for my 9:15. She's like, that's why I had asked you. She had asked me a question earlier that didn't occur like a question. Coming back to your original question, the example. So she's got about these 5 different things that are on her mental load that I'm not fully aware of, and we're not on the same page about urgency wise. And so as we're going through these, I'm thinking, this is dumb. This was unnecessary. Why are we doing this? Why not just put her in the car and she'll cry for a minute and that's fine. She doesn't want to do those things, and they are important to her. What I am proud of myself for coming back and doing now, I know I'm in a unique position because I make content about this. So everything that I do has a double awesomeness to it. One, it makes our relationship better. And two, it gives a great example for people to learn from. So we ended up yelling. I don't really yell much, but she gets a little heated. We exchanged some words as she was getting in the car at one point, as she's about to get into the car next to her. And I said, I think you need to take over. She's like, damn it, I was just going to sit in the back seat here. I don't have pants on. She was literally just going to go along for the ride. So then she's going around and getting pants. And now she's like, now I'm upset. Now I'm really mad because now it looks like I'm the one that made us late to daycare. And now I am going to lose another 15 minutes off of what I was doing too. And you didn't, if you had just communicated that you had a 9:15 call, like this would have been avoided. After that, she goes down. I go to my 9:15 call a couple minutes early now that I'm not managing that. So one, she had all these things on her mental load, but two, what is not spoken and it's hard to communicate in the moment is the emotional labor behind it. So what I did was I wrote things I felt were extra, and I wrote down the 5 different things: the pants, the brushing of the hair, the emptying of the trunk, the showing up at or before 9 o'clock didn't occur to me like an issue, and having her come along for the ride she could have been in the passenger seat. She also added a bow to her hair. All those things were a little bit extra that screwed us up in the morning. What I did as I wrote down those 5, I said, okay, these are why I think they're important to you. And so I took probably 15 minutes to look at each one. And so changing the pants, you'd purposely wash pants and felt that they matched better, and you take pride in clothing and presentation of your toddler. I don't want to experience judgment or comments or perceived judgment from other staff that are at daycare. So that's why I thought that was important to her. Second one, her hair didn't get washed last night, and I don't know a ton about long hair. That's actually part of the reason I'm growing mine out, is so I can appreciate what it's like to take care of long hair. But so I'm thinking, okay, if it's messy, like that doesn't seem like a big deal, but maybe there's more to it. So if the hair is not managed till tonight, then maybe it'll be tougher to deal with. She'll also have more resistance. There's probably gonna be more knots. Putting it up in a bow also looks good and can help to manage the hair during the day. And then lastly, emptying of the trunk made it possible for Alyssa to sit next to her instead of in front of her. And given our toddlers wanting Alyssa to come with, that'll soothe her upset versus she's going to deal with some guilt about just closing the door and saying goodbye. The value in this exercise for me was, one, I got an opportunity to see her perspective in the best way that I thought I could. And we had our weekly meeting about 2 hours later. We call it the boring meeting, which is to touch base on literally all the kind of boring operational expectation type things.
Yeah.
And so we ended up talking about, is it important that she brushes her hair every day? Is it important that she wears matching clothes? And so we went through them item by item, and I read to her just that. And she was able to add on, yeah, and like, you didn't think of this thing, you didn't think of that thing. But I think me coming to her side of the angle of it, I think was really helpful, and it could have easily turned into an argument if I had said, these are the dumb things that we did this morning that made us late. But so I think, coming back to connection codes, I think I'm hoping that in your language that I was able to give her some of the identity back that she lost via the way that I was speaking with her and dumbing down or like invalidating the things that she had wanted earlier.
I think that the parents, especially parents of young kids that are listening, are all like, I completely relate to that entire scenario. And I think the further you get away from having those teeny tiny kids, because my youngest is 4 now, I don't even remember some of those things. Or he can get himself dressed at this point. It's a hassle, it's a situation, but he can do it. And I think that there is so much happening there all at one time that it is the breeding ground for conflict. Often whenever, I think I said it recently on an episode, I've seen so many people, their marriages are failing in those like baby toddler years. And it's because those years are breeding grounds for conflict, because you're trying to manage your own schedules while taking care of this other human that she is Glenn would say she was regulating her emotions the best she knew how in that moment. Like she was feeling fear about going to daycare and sad that she was leaving mom and all of those things. And the only way she knows how to do it is to cry and to be upset. But for us as the parents, we're like, oh my gosh, I have to rearrange my entire life now. And I'm feeling emotion because you're feeling emotion. And now we're in a tangled web of emotion. Glenn, I want to give you space because I feel like
I just felt compelled to add to that. Parents of young children are also operating sleep deprived, and the militaries all over the world use sleep deprivation as a form of torture. So these little munchkins who we adore are torturing us and making us weaker, broken down versions of ourselves at the very time when we need to be the greatest on point.
But I think even, obviously, we don't have toddlers anymore. We don't have children at home anymore. And yet we can miss each other when we're trying to get out the door, because what I have in my mind that's priority and what he has in his often is very different. And it's if I don't communicate my need, if I don't communicate clearly what's happening for me, we can really miss each other. And it is that it can be so simple if I simply express, oh, I'm feeling fear we're not going to leave on time, or I'm feeling fear I'm not going to get home in time for my meeting. It's those things that tune us into each other. And I just realized we travel a lot with what we do, and I'm the tasker in our relationship. Glenn's one thing is to get a suitcase packed, and we laugh so much because we end up places and he forgot his socks, or he brought one shirt for a week of speaking. I'm like, babe, what?
And it's the shirt that I'm actually wearing.
Yes, and it's like, and we laugh about it. Thankfully, it doesn't create conflict at this point because we are able to communicate pretty clearly. But for me, I express loneliness a lot. I know Tira witnesses this, that because I'm the tasker, I'm the list person, I do experience loneliness in that. I feel all alone often in the job it takes to get us out to the airport on time. And Glenn is not aware even often of what airlines or what time, and he just depends on me to get it all done. And there's a loneliness in that I have gotten really good at just expressing. And that doesn't mean I expect it to become natural for him to do it. I just know I need his support, as in give me, like, don't try to fix me, don't try to excuse yourself. It's more, I just need you to hear me, that I do experience this as a loneliness. And then he'll say, what do you need? And there's times where I just have to be really specific. What I really need before we leave is I need you to do these things with me or for me so that we can leave on time. And that's been so huge, because in our early days, it was all internal for me. Like, how can he not see the obvious? How can he not know we're about to leave for a week and all this stuff has to be done? There was a lot of resentment, I would say, in our younger years before we figured some of these things out, especially with the tools of the connection codes where we can actually communicate at the core what we're feeling. And I think it's true for you too, that you have your list. It's just very different than my list when we're about to go out of town.
And a question for you there, because I think I get DMs all the time from like a lot of moms, a lot of women saying like, how do I bring this up with my partner? What I'm hearing you say is that a huge part of you not harboring resentment is your ability to communicate about it. And where is the line between communicating about your experience versus asking like to have him take on more, or like to learn something? Last year was a good example. We went to leave for a wedding and we're packing up, we're bringing our toddler with us, and we need to prep for the dog was going to stay with my parents. And so historically, my wife pretty much always manages everything around the dog. She's been a vet tech for years, so there's a lot less thinking required for her to accomplish the same task around prepping. Like, there's probably a pre-written task list in her head versus me, I need to come up with it from scratch. So it's more total effort. However, it's probably better on a macro level for the two of us, for me to work on something that it's harder to screw up versus if you forget snacks or something that you don't think of. And she felt better about relinquishing over to me. So where is it when you're communicating that you decide, you know what, instead of just communicating, I actually need help.
Yeah, I want y'all to answer. I know the answer. Pick me.
Okay, go ahead, Tara.
That's where the power of the fourth phrase. We have our three phrases. We ooh each other. We recognize like, oh, I've missed with you. If Wes shares, I feel lonely that I'm the only one managing our family calendar. This has been our issue for years, where he carried the mental load and I did not. I feel lonely in managing the family calendar. And when he approaches me with that loneliness, oh yeah, okay, I get that. I connect with that loneliness. I know what that feels like. So I can just give him space to be like, oh, I understand that. So then I can ask, what do you need? And at that point, sometimes we will say, I actually don't need anything. I just need you to hear me. Yeah. But in our situation, Wes says, I need you to learn how to use our family calendar. I need you to put the calendar on your phone. I need you to put your appointments in it. And I need you to keep it up to date and not rely on me to be your manager, because I am so bad at asking him. Last night I did it. I need to make a dermatologist appointment. And he said, Alexa, oh, I'm scared she's going to do it. She's talking to me now. He said her name, remind me to make a dermatologist appointment tomorrow. And she said, this sounds important. Do you need me to remind you until you do it? He said, yes. So she's reminded me every hour. I had to turn her off before I started this. I love it. But that's something that I was putting still that mental load on him. Mm-hmm. Then luckily we have the technology in our house where he can take that mental load immediately off. Mm-hmm. But just that asking, what do you need? And saying point blank, I need you to learn this. I need you to know how to fix our daughter's hair the right way. Whatever that is that you need from your partner to do that thing.
Yeah. And that's what we call the dance. It's not a one-time settles it. Phyllis and I have been married 41 and a half years, and we just dance. And so it's every day, literally. We have a daily meeting, 5 to 7 minutes each morning, where we're just going over what worked yesterday, what didn't work, what our schedule is for the day. So that's, for two people to live in close synchrony, it takes an ongoing thing. So it's not that we have a set January 1st, we're like, okay, this is how the year's going to go. That doesn't work. But because things change on January 2nd, if you figure everything out on January 1st, because humans are so complex, life is thick, which is great, but it's just an ongoing thing. So for her to be safe to convey her need to me continually, not just once a month, literally, who knows, every day is different, 10 times a day, to go, oh, babe, I need your partnership in this. And I love the term partnership. You don't have to say that, but it just washes over me that I'm a partner, not just a helper. And she'll say, hey, babe, could you partner with me in this? So now, and I share a lot, that I make our bed every day. I hate making our bed. I use the word hate here. I hate making our bed. And every day it's a pain point for me. It takes me about a minute. My world record is 43 seconds making our bed. But it usually takes me about a minute. And when I begin making the bed by myself, it's a pain experience. It would be registered on the brain as sadness. And I just go, oh, sad. I need to make the bed. Sad. Somewhere around 30 seconds in, I'm like, yeah, but joy, a lot of joy, because I know that my partner will feel joy when she walks through the room and the bed is made. It's a pain-joy experience every day. That's not going to change tomorrow or next week. As far as I know, I'm 62. I don't think I'll ever like making our bed. But it's worth it because it's valuable to her, and she's so incredibly valuable to me. I'm like, yeah, I'll endure the 1 minute of, it's only 30 seconds of pain, then it becomes a joy experience because I'm also almost finished. So that's just the dance. I'm always trying to discover her, find out what's a joy point for her, what will lessen her pain point.
One of the things I love, Zach, about what you are teaching is how to get people to where they don't even have to have the conversations anymore. And as you're teaching people how to have those conversations, I love your example of opening up the fridge and realizing, oh, we're out of groceries. We need groceries. You're like, oh, well, she'll figure that out. Where as a wife, yesterday, our kids were out of school. We needed groceries. At 8 o'clock last night, my doorbell rang and groceries appeared. Wes had opened our fridge, realized we needed groceries, and he just ordered them. And the amount of identity that I received in that moment of having a partner that sees the need, he's not waiting on me to ask. He's not waiting on me to do anything. he just takes action. And so, Zach, one of the things that you refer to yourself as a recovering man-child is, I think, the hat that you're turning your hat around. Do you have it on? Yeah. I imagine, since you say you're recovering, you know life before understanding the mental load and what that did to your partner. And now you're experiencing life now that you are filling in those gaps for her in a way that's a partnership that we don't even know is possible as people, because it's not the example that was given. So tell me what your before and after has looked like.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think a lot of the examples that I give around like the really simple moments of getting rid of mental load of, hey, how can I help, or what do you need, versus, hey, here's what I'm thinking you're going to need. I'm going to do this if you say nothing else. Instead of saying, hey, hun, we're out of groceries, implied question, when are you going to get groceries, versus sometimes I think there's a spectrum of mental load that you can put onto your own plate in your question or in your communication or in your no communication. In a lot of different aspects of life, I'm in different parts of the spectrum based on trust. So for example, like your husband clearly knows that you trust him to get the right groceries. At this point in time, just because my wife, I think she enjoys it, but I think she feels a sense of ownership that she appreciates around getting groceries. She's always asking me what I'm doing a list in the next 12 hours. Can you text me anything else that you need? It's usually just chunky peanut butter. But if I were to go and just get groceries, that would actually be an issue for us, because the running list that she has in her head gets messed up versus like some other things I know she just wants me to take the lead on. So coming back to your question, I think it used to be her taking the lead on 98% of the things around the house. I was happy to execute. I always felt I'm a good husband. Like I'll do anything she asks me to, rather than turning, I almost want to call it mom vision on. And I'll say more about that in a second, around what needs to be done around the house, what needs to be cleaned, what needs to be prepped, what needs to be baby proofed, what needs to be washed. I put up a story the other day. Someone asked me, like, just real talk, Zach, like, what % of the things around the house do you think our guys like see versus ignore? And I said, I'm gonna guess at like 70-30. I think 30% of the things they actually don't see. Actually, I'm still debating on this one. I think it depends on the guy, but I think a huge reason that women see a lot more, they see the dust, they see the scuffs on the floorboards, they see the cobweb in the top corner of the 20-foot tall room that we don't see, is because I think our culture places a lot of expectation on women for cleanliness of houses. If our kids show up to daycare and they're missing a layer of clothes, they're missing their hat or their gloves, the expectation is mom screwed up, not dad screwed up.
Totally.
There's a pretty viral song going on right now. I forget the name of the creator, but I just DM'd the other day. I think we're going to collaborate on a little bit of music. Is she says, I did the laundry and then I da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. She does all these like domestic labor tasks, and then she's like, and then I almost lost my mind when we went to the park and someone said, you are such a good dad. Having seen none of the invisible labor that she had been doing, and just by showing up, by breathing, by existing, he looks like a good dad. So
yeah, I can relate to that so much, especially in just the society of how we are operating right now, and the shame. I'm thinking about the emotions that I have felt in those situations, the amount of shame that I carry when my kids' clothes are not done, or their hair is messed up, or our house is dirty. And yesterday I had people walk in my house at 7:30 a.m. that I was not expecting to be at my house. Yeah, that was really fun. And I'm like, I walk into the room, Wes is just chatting it up with these strangers to me, and I can see all of the stuff in my kitchen and everywhere else. Those are the details that I see. You're 100% right, because it does very much feel that's my responsibility. Like, our house is in disarray because Tira was a failure the night before of cleaning it up. And so that adds shame, that adds fear of judgment, it adds hurt. And so then we're walking around with all of these emotions with each other. And that's what leads to the disconnects and the conflicts.
Right.
And so at that point, it looks like I'm fighting with Wes because he invited strangers into our house and the kitchen was dirty. But in reality, I'm upset because I feel shame over how our house was presented to people that I don't know. And when we can come from it at that angle, when I can approach Wes from the shame point versus, why did you let them in our house? Our house looked like this. Our conversation is totally different than it ever has been. So
I love that, because that is that emotion. I think about that, Tira, back in the early days, especially for us, I think I ruined so many moments, even with our kids, because I'm so task oriented that I walk in the door and instead of connecting emotionally with the kids when they were little, I would be going, why are all the lights on? And so I focus on the thing that really has very little value compared to the relationship. And I know that, like what you were saying, I'm sure for Wes, this was a friend that showed up in town after not seeing this friend for a long time. And so there was so much joy for Wes in connecting with an old friend that who cares if the dishes are out from the night before. But yes, as that other person, you're very much, I know, aware of all those things. And you've done that with us even when we are coming over and you feel shame because there's crumbs on the floor after you had dinner with your family last night. And of course, it's, oh my goodness, girl, how cool. Y'all had dinner together as a family around the table. Wow, love that. But you're thinking, yes, but now there's crumbs under the table and it's that shame. But if you just communicated it to us as you do, then it connects us. And you then are expressing that shame to us. And then we're just like, oh, girl, so much joy that y'all had dinner together last night. That means Wes is in town. How cool. And then we connect on a different level because we've just shared what our experience is, which I mean, to me goes all the way back even, Zach, to what you were saying about the morning of, for your wife, it was really that idea of, oh my goodness, she had this whole other emotional experience and you had a very different emotional experience. And that's the beauty of just showing up and being able to share at the core what's happening. And I love even the way you said when your business meeting, your boring meeting, I love that. Just that you were able to say to her, I see you in this.
Yeah.
And that gave the identity back to her, which is so beautiful. Zach, I just love that you are in this space, that you're using social media to look at things a little different, get us to slow down and go, yeah, what is my spouse experiencing? What am I experiencing? How can I take some of that load off of each other and just the reality of that? I think I love people who are talented like you are, that have this creative spark of, hey, I could create a message that could make a difference and I can use social media that way. There's a lot of power in having reels that show real life. And yet also, how can I do this better? How can I show up for my spouse in a more supportive way? And so I super love that. Appreciate what you do.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about emotion and how the emotion that's causing the disconnects, but I love that you are talking about the logistics of life as well, because logistics do play a role in even our emotional response. And you are teaching people how to handle the logistic in a way that helps smooth out the emotion. We talk about loneliness as this epidemic. And if you're feeling loneliness in your house because your partner is not partnering with you in things, that's a really rough house to be in. And you are teaching people how to partner with each other and see the invisible that's not seen. And so before we go into the core emotion, well, Zach, I want to know, where do people even get started? If a man is like, ooh, yeah, or a woman even, because I've struggled with this with Wes, how can I even see the unseen? What is something that I could do today to start this process of helping balance this mental load in our home?
I work with groups of guys. I've had a handful of individual clients, and right now I'm working on building out some group coaching courses. The other night I was talking about chapter 1 of the Fair Playbook, and one of the assignments I have, I give them a handful of questions that I've made specifically that I did out loud on TikTok about a year ago when I was first reading the book. And the assignment is, to go through about 10 different chores / responsibilities around the house and assess about what percent of that you own versus your partner owns. And for my group of guys, they all did it, and 2 of them wasn't necessarily part of the assignment, was to check in with their partners about, is this what you see? And what we found was, if we think of about a pie chart where it's conception, the initial thought of a task, the planning, the logistics, and then the execution, the actual doing of the task. Let's say for groceries, let's say we have a birthday party coming up, we need X, Y, and Z. All right, that's the conception. The planning is actually getting it on the list, timing the pickup, or figuring out if they're bringing the kids with them. And then the actual doing of showing up and getting the groceries. A lot of guys are just seeing that third piece of the pie chart. And so once they're identifying, oh, this is only a third. And what you were saying is, how do we start seeing the other parts of the pie chart? I think that by starting the conversation with, here's what I think I'm doing 90% of the tasks. I pick up the groceries all the time. Okay. How do you feel about making the list? Oh, that's all you. That's actually part of the pie chart there. But so I think taking a look at, and that's what the Fair Play method is. They actually broke down about 100 responsibilities that exist domestically. And then the goal is to break down the minimum standard of care for those things. So I think when we're breaking down the minimum standard of care so that one person can completely own it. So for example, my wife's leaving for 6 days. I need to be able to do pretty much everything in the house for the next 6 days. And if we hadn't had conversations around minimum standard of care for all these different things, I'd end up calling her 5 times, but my full plan is to not have to call her a single time besides checking in, hoping that she's doing.
Yeah, that's so good. I see it so often with people that if there's not space to learn and you're not willing to step into those roles and figure out what parts of the pie chart do you not understand and know, you're going to be missing out on a lot. And you and your partner are hindering. There's this roadblock that you can't get through, which is so powerful. And I also want to comment on just, Glenn, I think mentioned it, the identity that you gave to your wife and seeing her by going back and making the list of, these are the things that I felt were silly, but maybe this is what her intention was for those things, and sharing that with her. I just can't imagine what identity she received in that moment of just letting her know that she was seen. And that it's so, so powerful. Okay, Zach, we end every episode with actually doing our core emotion wheel. And would you be willing to do the wheel with us today?
Sure. Is there a recommended order that I go in?
Nope. Whatever you feel.
All right. Let's see. So I've felt joy today. I found out that someone pointed out to me that Kristen Bell, the actress, follows me on Instagram. Was really cool.
Wow.
And this week there should be a CNN article coming out where someone interviewed me. I'm feeling anger. I think what's going on in the Middle East and the amount that I would love to talk about it and the lack of education that I have around it. This might be more frustration than anger, but I feel like a lot of people are telling me to stay in my lane. There's a lot of people asking me to speak out about it. So I think, I don't know if it fits in anger. This is interesting. This is actually the first time I'm doing the wheel, but I think I'm feeling shame within that. Don't feel like I can appropriately speak to it, as well as I feel shame when I stepped away there. As I've been growing my coaching practice, I have consults, and my calendars are not synced up. So when I looked earlier, I said to Alyssa, from 4 to about 7, like I should be able to take over. So if you need to get packing or work done, it should be good. And then looked back and realized I didn't check my other calendar. I actually have 3 calls in there. The question is, do I give Alyssa the space and I take the sales calls with a possible toddler in my arms, or really ask for the space? So I think I feel shame and some guilt around that, because I know that I would have expected myself to take the extra 30-45 seconds to check both calendars, and or clearly I need better systems to automatically populate both calendars. Fear. I'm feeling fearful around, I would love to be doing this full-time coaching, and I know that by only spending probably 15 hours a week on this and this message and this education, that there's a lot of education that could be getting put out there that's not. And there's a ton of fear around like having a consistent paycheck that I can count on. Lonely. I think I actually feel a little bit of loneliness around not knowing how to speak about the Middle East, because most of the people that want me to speak out are consumers, not creators, so they don't understand the pressure of it. So my friends that I did make a post and came to me, and they're Jewish, and they didn't feel like I spoke to their experience in the anti-Semitism that they've been experiencing. That was really hard to hear from them. I took the post down, and I think I feel lonely in that. Like, I want to do right by a lot of different people, and there aren't too many creators, I think, that feel the press. I'm sure there are a good amount, but there's no way to find out who's also dealing with that, talk about it directly with them. Similarly, I think I feel sad that I can't effectively use the platform how I would want to. Also, especially like I don't want to lose my friends. That I think some of my friends think that my experience or my presence on social media is purely clout based, that it's, oh, you're doing all this for attention and you get money because you get attention, when that's really not my intention of doing this. I think there are certainly plenty of ego moments of me enjoying when a video hits 1 million or a celebrity acknowledges my existence. But at the same time, at this point, I'm much more interested in moving the needle on men taking over mental in the world. And hurt. I feel hurt that I feel like there could have been a better way for them to communicate that. And I feel hurt that they can't see the bigger vision behind what I do out here, besides that I'm just in it for ego.
Wow.
Whew. I get that. Thank you so much for sharing, because there's so much of what you said that is stirring within my soul. And that's one of the reasons I love this wheel so much. It is so connecting, and it helps you realize that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. And so much of what you said this morning, I processed a lot of loneliness with Wes, actually. And talking with you, I'm like, I'm not alone. So thank you, Zach, for sharing. Thank you for the education that you're doing. I am grateful for all of the women and men that are finding what you're doing, but I'm especially grateful because now Wes can understand what I've tried to explain to him for selfish reasons. Thank you for that. And I know that it's really important work in helping people to carry that together and to not feel alone in what you're experiencing in your home and in your life. And so, Zach, can you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. And one more thing before I go into that is I do want to offer some hope for a lot of the couples out there that are struggling with that. Alyssa and I looked back a couple weeks ago. We realized that back in 2019, there was an article she read about mental load, and she was really scared to share it with me because she was afraid I was going to be defensive and not hear it. And now here I am writing these articles, making these videos about the same things. I know that's a DM I receive all the time. How do I send this video to my partner without them getting defensive? How do I put this on their For You page? And so there's hope that we'll get it someday. Just stay committed and use your connection codes to talk about how you feel lonely in these moments. And I love that you mentioned you're going through it right now. So Zach is a new connection coder. He's gone through a few of the modules in Foundation. So I'm excited to see, as you learn those elements of communication, how this even dives deeper, because I think the two go so beautifully together. I'm looking forward to when I get to the module about the wheel and doing some kind of collaboration with you guys, because
Oh, cool.
that was actually the first time I went through it, and I remember you describing it, and I think I saw a video you guys posted about it, and I could acknowledge the power of it, but didn't actually feel it until I did it. That was pretty cool. So to your question, where people can find me, I'll drop you the link for the show notes if people want to work with me. I work currently directly with men, and I think a huge part is a lot of us guys, I think we need to celebrate those small wins of, hey, I didn't ask her She didn't tell me to bring the trash out today. And I think we need those wins behind closed doors so that we're not like, hey, honey, you didn't ask me to bring the garbage out today. She's like, yeah, no, obviously, like we've been doing this for years. But I think we need those small wins to create good habits. And that's a huge part of the programming is I am trying to build a culture with these small groups of guys to celebrate those small wins. Hey, I didn't ask if there was ketchup in the fridge. I took the extra 45 seconds to check if it was there. Sounds really stupid telling your wife that, but in our little group of recovering man children, we know the value of it.
Yeah. Well, and building a community of men that can connect and have a growth mindset of obviously you're bringing together men that want to improve their lives and their marriage. Absolutely. And that is so powerful. Especially we talk a lot about girlfriends, we talk about those things all the time, but it's not very often that men feel safe in spaces to talk about their marriage and to talk about how they're bettering themselves for their wives. So I love that you're creating that space. And people, you can also find Zach at Real Zach ThinkShare on Instagram and TikTok. And I will link all of that in the show notes. So you can follow him and definitely send it to your husband so they can get plugged in with the community
with
of
context.
men.
Don't just drop them an email. Give them some context. Hey, this reminds me of a conversation we had last week. I'd love to talk more about it with you.
There you go.
I think you need that extra sentence to not have them lose identity, because my content can be triggering and shaming sometimes without that context.
Yeah.
Wow, so good. And Zach, one thing I want to say, and I love that you even told our listeners that this was the first time you did the wheel. And oh my word, I just want to repeat that, because sometimes, and the fact that you said you knew about it, you just had not done it, and then you felt it, like you really felt the power behind it. And what I love in getting to hear you do the wheel is it melted my heart towards you, Zach, because even though we've talked for an hour, it wasn't until you did the wheel that I saw the tenderness and the fact how many of your emotions had to do with what's going on in the Middle East. And I wish I could hug you. I just love that you're sensitive about that and what a challenge it is to talk about it because the criticism is there. When you have a voice that's out there, people are so quick to criticize what you have to say. And so thank you for being so vulnerable in your wheel and so transparent and so in the moment. And it's so powerful. And I think for our listeners to understand, when we do the wheel with each other, not just in our partnerships, but with strangers, it draws us, there's a deeper connection. There's like instant, I know you better because now I know what's happening for you emotionally, and it's so connecting. So thank you for that vulnerability with a group of strangers. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. And I'm going to drop all of Zach's details in the show notes. So definitely go there and find those. And we do all of this because
you need this.
You deserve this.
So let's do this.
Let's do this.